Welcome back to Bible Quizzes. Today we got another quiz for you guys based on the Old Testament. So let's get started. 1. King Saul was the father-in-law of David. True. 1 Samuel 18:27. David took his men with him and went out and killed 200 Philistines and brought back their foreskins. They counted out the full number to the king so that David might become the king's son-in-law. Then Saul gave him his daughter Michal in marriage. 2. Job is mentioned by name in the Old Testament more times than any other individual. False. Ezekiel 1:3. The word of the Lord came to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, by the Kebar River in the land of the Babylonians. There the hand of the Lord was on him. 3. The prophet Jonah was swallowed by a whale. False. Jonah 1:17. Now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. 4. Abraham was originally named Abram. True. Genesis 17:5. No longer will you be called Abram, your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. 5. Joshua was the first high priest of Israel. False. Exodus 28:1. Have Aaron your brother brought to you from among the Israelites along with his sons Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar and Ithamar, so they may serve me as priests. 6. Isaiah prophesied the fall of Babylon before it became a dominant power. True. Isaiah 13:1-22, a prophecy against Babylon that Isaiah son of Amos saw. 7. King Solomon wrote the book of Ecclesiastes. True. Ecclesiastes 1:1, the words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. 8. The prophet Elijah never died but was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind. True. 2 Kings 2:11. As they were walking along and talking together, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them, and Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. 9. Daniel was thrown into a den of lions because he prayed to God. False. Daniel 6:10-17. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God just as he had done before. 10. King David was the youngest son of Jesse. False. 1 Samuel 16:10-11. Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to him, "The Lord has not chosen these." So he asked Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?" "They're still the youngest," Jesse answered. "He is tending the sheep." Samuel said, "Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives." 11. Moses' sister Miriam was struck with leprosy for criticizing Moses. True. Numbers 12:10-11. When the cloud lifted from above the tent, Miriam's skin was leprous. It became as white as snow. Aaron turned toward her and saw that she had a defiling skin disease. And he said to Moses, "Please, my Lord, I ask you not to hold against us the sin we have so foolishly committed." 12. The name Israel was given to Jacob after he wrestled with God. True, Genesis 32:28. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." 13. Solomon's temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. True, 2 Chronicles 36:19. They set fire to God's temple and broke down the wall of Jerusalem. They burned all the palaces and destroyed everything of value there. 14. The Israelites spent exactly 40 years wandering the wilderness. False. Numbers 14:33-34. Your children will be shepherds here for 40 years, suffering for your unfaithfulness, until the last of your bodies lies in the wilderness for 40 years, 1 year for each of the 40 days you explored the land. You'll suffer for your sins and know what it is like to have me against you. 15. The prophet Micah was contemporary with King David. False. Micah 1:1. The word of the Lord that came to Micah of Moresheth during the reigns of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, the vision he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. 16. Adam lived for over 900 years. True, Genesis 5:5. Altogether, Adam lived a total of 930 years and then he died. 17. Cain, who killed his brother Abel, is cursed to be a wanderer on the earth. True, Genesis 4:11-12. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You'll be as restless wanderer on the earth. 18. The prophet Ezekiel was carried away to Babylon in the first wave of exiles. False. Ezekiel 1:1-2. In my 30th year, in the 4th month of the 5th day, while I was among the exiles by the Kebar River, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. On the 5th of the month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim. 19. Jephthah sacrificed his daughter as a burnt offering to God. True, Judges 11:30-40. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord, if you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering. 20. Isaiah prophesied that a virgin would conceive and bear a son. True, Isaiah 7:14. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign, the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. 21. Who was the youngest son of Jacob? Benjamin, Issachar, Joseph, or Naphtali? Benjamin, Genesis 35:18. As she breathed her last, for she was dying, she named her son Benoni, but his father named him Benjamin. 22. Which city did Jonah preach against, leading to its repentance? Nineveh, Jerusalem, Babylon, or Jericho? Nineveh, Jonah 3:4. Jonah began by going a day's journey into the city, proclaiming 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. 23. Who killed Goliath of Gath with a sling and a stone? Levi, Jonathan, Saul, or David? David, 1 Samuel 17:50. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. 24. Which prophet was fed by ravens during a time of drought? Elijah, Isaiah, Elisha, or Isaiah? Elijah, 1 Kings 17:6. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. 25. Who was the first high priest of Israel? Aaron, Phinehas, Eli, or Joshua? Aaron, Exodus 28:1. Have Aaron your brother brought to you from among the Israelites, along with his sons Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar and Ithamar, so they may serve me as priests. 26. Who was the wife of King Ahab of Israel, infamous for promoting Baal worship? Athaliah, Jezebel, Huldah, or Michal? Jezebel, 1 Kings 16:31. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam son of Nebat, but he also married Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and began to serve Baal and worship him. 27. Who was the father of King Solomon? David, Solomon, Saul, or Jesse? David, 2 Samuel 12:24. Then David comforted his wife Bathsheba, and he went to her and made love to her. She gave birth to a son, and they named him Solomon. The Lord loved him. 28. Which judge of Israel famously defeated the Midianites with only 300 men? Gideon, Jephthah, Samson, or Ehud? Gideon, Judges 7:7. The Lord said to Gideon, with the 300 men that lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands. Let all the others go home. 29. Which Old Testament book begins with the phrase, the vision of Isaiah the son of Amos? Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, or Daniel? Isaiah 1:1. The vision concerning Judah and Jerusalem that Isaiah son of Amos saw during the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. 30. Who was the grandson of King Saul and son-in-law of David, who attempted to seize the throne after Saul's death? Mephibosheth, Adonijah, Absalom, or Ishbosheth? Ishbosheth. 2 Samuel 2:10. Ishbosheth, son of Saul, was 40 years old when he became king over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. The tribe of Judah, however, remained loyal to David. 31. Who wrote the Book of Lamentations? Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, or Nehemiah? Jeremiah. Lamentations 1:1. How deserted lies the city, once so full of people. How like a widow is she, who once was great among the nations. She who was queen among the provinces has now become a slave. 32. Who was the prophet that God called to preach repentance to the city of Nineveh? Isaiah, Elijah, Jonah, or Elisha? Jonah 1:1-2. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. 33. Which woman was the mother of Samuel the prophet? Michal, Bathsheba, Abigail, or Hannah? Hannah, 1 Samuel 1:20. So in the course of time, Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, saying, "Because I asked the Lord for him." 34. Who was the father of Abraham? Peter, Terah, Nahor, or Haran? Terah, Genesis 11:26-27. After Terah had lived 70 years, he became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. 35. Who was the prophet that God commanded to marry a prostitute as a symbol of Israel's unfaithfulness? Hosea, Amos, Joel, or Obadiah? Hosea 1:2. When the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him, "Go marry a promiscuous woman and have children with her, for like an adulterous wife, this land is guilty of unfaithfulness to the Lord." 36. Which Old Testament king was known for his wisdom and wrote many proverbs? Ahaz, Solomon, Uzziah, or Manasseh? Solomon, 1 Kings 4:29. God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight, and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore. 37. Who was the son of David who rebelled against him and attempted to take the throne? Adonijah, Amnon, Absalom, or Solomon? Absalom, 2 Samuel 15:10-12. Then Absalom sent secret messengers throughout the tribes of Israel to say, "As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpets, then say, 'Absalom is king in Hebron.'" 200 men from Jerusalem had accompanied Absalom. They had been invited as guests and went quite innocently. Knowing nothing about the matter, while Absalom was offering sacrifices, he also sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor, to come from Gilo, his hometown. And so the conspiracy gained strength and Absalom's following kept on increasing. 38. Which Old Testament prophet saw a vision of a chariot of fire and horses of fire? Elisha, Ezekiel, Elijah, or Isaiah? Elijah, 2 Kings 2:11-12. As they were walking along and talking together, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them, and Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha saw this and cried out, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel." And Elisha saw him no more. Then he took hold of his garment and tore it in two. 39. Who was the Old Testament prophet who saw a vision of a man with a measuring line? Zechariah, Haggai, Malachi, or Micah? Haggai 2:1-2. On the 21st day of the 7th month, the word of the Lord came through the prophet Haggai. "Speak to Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, to Joshua, son of Jozadak, the high priest, and to the remnant of the people, ask them." 40. Which Old Testament king was the father of King Solomon? David, Rehoboam, Saul, or Ehud? David, 2 Samuel 12:24. Then David comforted his wife Bathsheba, and he went to her and made love to her. She gave birth to a son, and they named him Solomon. The Lord loved him. 41. Who was the Old Testament king who built the first temple in Jerusalem? Gideon, Samson, Solomon, or Samuel? Solomon, 1 Kings 6. Solomon builds the temple. 42. Who was the Old Testament king who famously cut his robe to show mercy to David? Saul, Jonathan, Malchus, or Absalom? Jonathan, 1 Samuel 18:3, and Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. 43. Which Old Testament character's wife became a pillar of salt when she looked back at the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah? Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, or Lot? Lot, Genesis 19:26. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. 44. Who was the Old Testament character who led the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem? Ezra, Zerubbabel, Nehemiah, or Nehemiah? Nehemiah 2:17. Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in? Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we'll no longer be in disgrace. 45. Which Old Testament character was sold into slavery by his brothers and eventually became a ruler in Egypt? Jacob, Benjamin, Joseph, or Reuben? Joseph, Genesis 37:28. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. 46. Who was the Old Testament judge famously defeated the Philistines with a jawbone of a donkey? Samson, Jehoshaphat, Josiah, or Manasseh? Samson, Judges 15:15-17. Finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. 47. Which Old Testament prophet was instructed to shave his head and beard as a sign of impending judgment? Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Amos, or Hosea? Jeremiah 7:29. Cut off your hair and throw it away. Take up a lament on the barren heights, for the Lord has rejected and abandoned this generation that is under his wrath. 48. Where did Moses receive the 10 Commandments from God? Mount Nebo, Mount Moriah, Mount Carmel, or Mount Sinai? Mount Sinai, Exodus 19:20. The Lord descended to the top of Mount Sinai and called Moses to the top of the mountain, so Moses went up. 49. In which city did Joshua and the Israelites conquer the walls by marching around them? Jericho, Bethlehem, Jerusalem, or Hebron? Jericho, Joshua 6:1-21. Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. 50. Where did David defeat Goliath in a famous battle? Valley of Elah, Valley of Jezreel, Valley of Megiddo, or Valley of Achor? Valley of Elah, 1 Samuel 17:2-3. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the Valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with the valley between them. 51. In which city did King Solomon build the first temple for God? Samaria, Jericho, Jerusalem, or Israel? Israel, 1 Kings 6:1-2. In the 480th year after the Israelites came out of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, the 2nd month, he began to build the temple of the Lord. The temple that King Solomon built for the Lord was 60 cubits long, 20 wide, and 30 high. 52. Where did the Israelites cross over the Jordan River into the Promised Land? Bethel, Jericho, Shechem, or Gilgal? Gilgal, Joshua 5:10. On the evening of the 14th day of the month, while camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, the Israelites celebrated the Passover. 53. Which city did Jonah try to flee to instead of going to Nineveh as God commanded? Tarshish, Tarsus, Joppa, or Antioch? Tarshish, Jonah 1:3. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. 54. Where did Jacob dream of a ladder reaching up to heaven with angels ascending and descending? Bethel, Hebron, Beersheba, or Shechem? Bethel, Genesis 28:18-19. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called the place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. 55. Where did Abraham go to sacrifice Isaac, obeying God's command? Mount Moriah, Mount Sinai, Mount Nebo, or Mount Carmel? Mount Moriah, Genesis 22:2. Then the God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." 56. Where did David hide from King Saul while being pursued before becoming king? Moab, Gibeah, Adullam, or Gath? Adullam, 1 Samuel 22:1-5. David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and his father's household heard about it, they went down to him there. 57. Where did Moses lead the Israelites after crossing the Red Sea on dry ground? Mount Sinai, Mount Nebo, Mount Horeb, or Mount Carmel? Mount Sinai, Exodus 19:1-2. On the first day of the third month after the Israelites left Egypt, on that very day they came to the desert of Sinai. After they set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. 58. What event caused confusion of languages and the scattering of people across the earth? Noah's flood, Exodus from Egypt, David's anointing as king, or Tower of Babel? Tower of Babel, Genesis 11:1-9. The Tower of Babel. 59. What was the name of the valley where King Josiah was killed in battle against Pharaoh Necho of Egypt? Valley of Jezreel, Valley of Elah, Valley of Megiddo, or Valley of Kidron? Valley of Megiddo, 2 Kings 23:29-30. While Josiah was king, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up to the Euphrates River to help the king of Assyria. King Josiah marched out to meet him in battle, but Necho faced him and killed him at Megiddo. Josiah's servant brought his body in a chariot from Megiddo to Jerusalem and buried him in his own tomb. And the people of the land took Jehoahaz, son of Josiah, and anointed him and made him king in the place of his father. 60. What was the name of the city where Saul was anointed as the first king of Israel by the prophet Samuel? Bethlehem, Mizpah, Gibeah, or Ramah? Mizpah, 1 Samuel 10:17-24. Samuel summoned the people of Israel to the Lord at Mizpah and said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought Israel up out of Egypt, and I delivered you from the power of Egypt and all the kingdoms that oppressed you." 61. What event marked the creation of the world according to Genesis? God creates the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. 62. Which event did God use to judge the wickedness of humanity, sparing only Noah and his family? The flood. Genesis 6:7-8. So the Lord said, I'll wipe from the face of the earth the human race I've created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. 63. Which event involved the Israelites' escape from Egypt, crossing the Red Sea on dry ground? Exodus from Egypt. Exodus 14:21-31. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. 64. In which verse does God promise, I'll never again curse the ground because of man? Genesis 8:21. Genesis 8:21. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I'll never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. 65. What did Moses receive in Mount Sinai? The Ten Commandments. Exodus 20:1-17. The Ten Commandments. 66. Which verse records Isaiah's prophecy about a virgin conceiving and bearing a son named Emmanuel? Isaiah 7:14. Isaiah 7:14. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. 67. Why does Cain kill his brother Abel? Because God is more pleased by Abel's sacrifice than by Cain's. Genesis 4:4-5. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry and his face was downcast. 68. How does Jacob steal his brother Esau's inheritance rights? By tricking his father with the help of his mother. Genesis 27:22-23. Jacob went close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau, so he proceeded to bless him. 69. How many sons does Jacob have? Sons. Genesis 35:22. While Israel was living in that region, Reuben went in and slept with his father's concubine Bilhah, and Israel heard of it. Jacob had 12 sons. 70. Which verse declares the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom? Proverbs 9:10. Proverbs 9:10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. 71. How does God first appear to Moses? A burning bush. Exodus 3:1-6. Moses and the burning bush. 72. What object that God gives Moses allows him to perform signs and wonders? The wooden staff, Exodus 4, 1-5. Then the Lord said to him, "Reach out your hand and take it by the tail." So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. "This," said the Lord, "is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you." 73. Why does the prophet Nathan rebuke David? David commits adultery with Bathsheba. 2 Samuel 12, 1-14. Nathan rebukes David. 74. What does David bring to Jerusalem to bless the religious city? The Ark of the Covenant. 2 Samuel 6, 12-19. Now King David was told, "The Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has, because of the Ark of God." So David went to bring up the Ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. When those who were carrying the Ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. 75. Which verse declares, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding"? Proverbs 3:5. Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. 76. Why does God reprimand Job? Because Job uses human knowledge to question God's ways. Job 38, 1-3. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. He said, "Who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me." 77. Which verse declares, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork"? Psalm 19:1. Psalm 19:1. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. 78. What do the residents of Babylon attempt to build that angers God? A large tower. Genesis 11:4. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we'll be scattered over the face of the whole earth." 79. Which verse declares, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope"? Jeremiah 29:11. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. 80. What object does Joseph plant in Benjamin's satchel in order to test his brother's goodwill? Silver cup. Genesis 44, 1-2. Now Joseph gave these instructions to the steward of his house. Fill them in sacks with as much food as they can carry, and put each man's silver in the mouth of his sack. Then put my cup, the silver one, in the mouth of the youngest one's sack, along with the silver for his grain, and he did as Joseph said. And that's all our questions for today. So remember, put your score down below, then share this with your friends and family, and then we'll see you guys in the next one.